Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, I think. It's this idea of planting churches that have real kingdom impact.
Yeah, the source we're looking at digs into how churches can be, well, more than just Sunday morning gatherings.
Exactly. More than just worship and evangelism, important as those are, but like powerful forces for good, right?
Yeah.
Bringing transformation, especially for the poor and oppressed.
It's about seeing the church as, not just a destination, but an active agent in the community, going out.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack what kingdom impact actually means, according to this source. We'll look at the different dimensions, the practical steps, how service ministries and church planting can actually work together organizationally.
And, crucially, the potential pitfalls. Things to watch out for.
Right. There are definitely some cautions in here. So let's dive in and unpack this source material you've shared.
Sounds good. Well, the source starts right at the core, trying to define this term, kingdom impact. The main idea is planting churches that are meant to be a witness, a sign, and even a foretaste of the kingdom of God.
Witness, sign, and foretaste. That sounds significant. What does that look like on the ground?
Well, it means these churches need to address human needs that go beyond just the purely spiritual stuff, evangelism and discipleship.
So like practical needs.
Yeah, the source is really clear, especially highlighting the needs of the poor, the illiterate, saying their needs just cannot be ignored. It's presented as non-negotiable if you want to be a true expression of the kingdom.
Gotcha. So it's not just counting churches or converts, but looking at the actual quality of the church, its influence.
Exactly. It's not just about proclaiming God's message, but actually manifesting God's character, things like compassion, justice, restoration. So kingdom impact is defined as the church's positive influence in all its relationships, reflecting Christ's reign, basically.
And the source acknowledges, I assume, that the kingdom isn't fully here yet?
Oh, absolutely. It's clear that the full perfect kingdom comes when Christ returns. But the idea is that where Christ is reigning now, in the hearts of believers and in the church community, the kingdom is present.
Like that verse in Romans, righteousness, peace, and joy.
Exactly, Romans 14:17. That's the character of the kingdom now. And this transformation starts, unseen the new birth, submitting to Christ, then it changes the believer, shakes the church community.
And then spills out into the world.
That's the idea. The church becomes this imperfect foretaste, as the source puts it.
Imperfect, yeah.
Right.
Because there's still suffering and injustice.
Right. The church can't magically fix everything in a world not fully submitted to Christ yet, but its presence, like salt and light, should bear witness to the kingdom's reality and goodness, drawing people in. That's the core of this kingdom impact idea.
That's a pretty compelling vision.
Yeah.
So how does this work in practice? The source breaks it down into 3 dimensions, right?
Yeah, a framework. The basic idea is that these kingdom communities show Christ's lordship over all areas of life, personal, family, social, economic, even political.
Not just the religious part of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source quotes Zach Naringi saying, "Kingdom community is both the means and the goal of the proclamation of the good news of the kingdom of God." So these 3 dimensions are distinct, but they're all connected.
Okay, let's unpack them. Dimension 1 is probably the most obvious one for church planting, the Great Commission.
Right. Absolutely foundational. Making disciples of all nations, baptizing, teaching. Matthew 28, it's about sending, proclaiming, gathering, multiplying.
The church is born from the gospel and takes the gospel out.
Exactly. It has to be gospel-centered.
Yeah.
Because transformed individuals are, the building blocks for any community transformation. You can't have one without the other.
Okay, Great Commission, evangelism, discipleship, makes sense. What's dimension 2?
Dimension 2 is the Great Commandment, love in action.
Love God, love your neighbor.
Yep, Matthew 22. And the source really emphasizes they're inseparable. Quoting 1 John, you can't claim to love God if you don't love your neighbor.
And this isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling, it's practical.
Oh, yeah. Practical, sacrificial love, even loving enemies, like Jesus taught in Matthew 5. The source says something powerful. We cannot not love. It's expressed through compassion, justice, upholding dignity, meeting the needs of the whole person.
Body, soul, mind.
Right. And this isn't new either. The source mentions that early Protestant missions often included medical and educational work right alongside evangelism.
So it's always been kind of integrated, especially in certain contexts.
Yeah, especially for urban churches or those working with the poor. The social, economic, physical needs are just unavoidable. They see the connection daily. People like Tetsuano Yamamori talk about church planting as part of a total urban strategy.
Didn't the source mention a Thailand report?
Yes, saying for the urban poor, a key strategy is creating communities where Christians live and share life equally, basically, these kingdom communities.
And the Lausanne report from '82. That sounds important.
Very significant. It framed social action as a consequence of evangelism, a bridge to it, and a partner of it, distinct but related. They use the analogy of a marriage.
A marriage is a strong image. The example from Venezuela sounded like it really lived this out.
It's a fantastic example. La Iglesia Evangelica Pentecostal Las Acacias started small with telephone counseling.
Just phone counseling, wow.
Yeah, that led to people gathering, forming a church. They grew, got a building, kept a strong evangelistic focus, but also started providing medical services, legal aid counseling, even a drug rehab center.
Hogar Nueva Vida, right?
That's the one. It's a powerful picture of holistic kingdom impact, addressing spiritual, physical, social needs together.
Okay, so Great Commission, Great Commandment. What's the third dimension?
The third is the Great Calling, worship and the glorification of God. This is seen as the ultimate end, the ultimate purpose of all mission.
Ah, right. This connects to that John Piper quote, doesn't it?
Exactly. The source quotes him, "Missions exist because worship doesn't. Worship, therefore, is the fuel and goal of missions."
So worship is the goal because it's what we'll do eternally.
Precisely. It's our ultimate great calling, but it's also the fuel.
How does worship fuel mission? That's interesting.
Well, as Christopher Wright puts it, the church's praise energizes it for mission. Our connection with Christ, abiding in him, like John 15 talks about, that's where the strength and inspiration come from, to do both the evangelism and the acts of love.
So planted churches have to be worshiping communities, both when they gather and in daily life.
Absolutely. Living as sacrifices, like Romans 12 says. Our lives become a form of worship, a testimony, lived anticipating that internal worship described in Revelation.
Okay, so commission, commandment, calling. 3 dimensions, all interconnected. Different churches might emphasize one more than others, but all need to be there.
That's the takeaway from the source on this. They're distinct parts of the whole, all contributing to a full expression of kingdom community, like partners in that marriage analogy.
That framework really helps understand the why. But let's get practical. How does a church planter actually start doing the love in action part? It sounds like it could be overwhelming.
It can be, yeah. The source gives some practical steps for getting started with these service ministries, compassion, justice, economic development, all that. And it notes this is just a summary of a huge field.
Right. The list of potential ministries was long: food banks, clinics, literacy, job training, microloans.
A ton of options. But the immediate caution is careful assessment is needed. Planters have to look realistically at community needs, their own team's expertise and resources, the commitment level required, potential partnerships.
Don't bite off more than you can chew.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the demands or the pitfalls. It has to be balanced with the core work of planting the church.
So what are the basic steps for starting wisely? Where do you begin?
Crucially, step 1 is begin with the community. Don't just show up with your own agenda. Listen. Ask local people what they see as the greatest needs. What do they think the root causes are? What solutions have they tried or envisioned?
So, less talking, more listening, especially at the start. Talk to local leaders, residents.
Precisely. An outsider's view can be way off base. The source cites Tembo on this. Listen carefully, avoid making promises you can't keep, and try to discern the real needs beneath the surface, not just the felt needs.
Listen first.
Yeah.
Got it. Step 2.
Start small. Pick 1 or 2 things you can actually manage. Maybe visiting people in prison or the hospital, helping at an orphanage, things that don't need massive resources or specialized skills initially.
Or like a simple community project.
Yeah, a neighborhood cleanup, helping build a small playground, something tangible but achievable. It makes a difference, builds relationships, and helps embed that DNA of caring in the church from the start. Plus, you gain experience.
Good point. Start small. Step 3.
Evaluate local resources and assets. What's already happening in the community? Long-term solutions need local buy-in. Often, the best thing is to come alongside existing efforts.
Builds trust, avoids reinventing the wheel.
Right. Coordinate. Or you might find a critical gap nobody's filling, and then maybe the church initiates something new.
Okay, find out what's going on. 4th step.
Carefully assess the church plant's own capacity. Honestly evaluate. What expertise do we have? What resources? What level of commitment can we realistically sustain? Making promises you can't keep is damaging.
And trying to run complex programs without qualified people could do harm.
Absolutely. Get professional advice for bigger projects and think through the whole life cycle of a ministry. Like, prison ministry doesn't end at the prison gates. What about post-release support? Are you ready for that?
Wow, that's a deep level of planning. Fifth step.
Consider partnering with experienced Christian NGOs. Organizations like World Relief, Samaritan's Purse, Compassion, Tear Fund. They have experience, infrastructure, funding that a new church plant just won't have.
Makes sense to leverage their expertise. But there was a warning here too, right?
A big one. You have to clarify expectations up front. Reporting requirements. What happens when their funding cycle ends? And beware the open pipe syndrome that Wallace warned about.
Where the church just becomes an overwhelmed aid distributor.
Yeah, and its own core mission suffers. It's a real danger.
Okay, partner carefully. Sixth.
Plan for local sustainability. The old teach a man to fish idea. The goal should be empowering locals to meet their own needs, reducing dependency on outside aid, except maybe in emergencies.
Like the example of avoiding high-tech equipment locals couldn't maintain.
Exactly. Sometimes simpler is better for long-term ownership. It builds dignity and self-reliance. You need to recruit and train local people from day one to take ownership.
Makes sense. Seventh step.
Focus on empowerment, not just aid. Emergency relief is one thing, but ongoing work should help people overcome challenges themselves. Change the perspective from clients or victims to agents of change. The source emphasizes how the gospel itself is profoundly empowering, restoring dignity, hope, responsibility.
That links back strongly to the spiritual dimension.
Oh.
And the last step, number 8.
Integrate the spiritual dimension naturally. Don't compartmentalize like we often do in the West, but also don't manipulate people using their need. No bait and switch.
Be clear about your motivation.
Yes. Say something like, we're Christians, we do this out of God's love, we'd be happy to pray with you or talk about faith if you're interested. Be upfront, but don't force it.
The Rwanda Clinic example was powerful here. People preferred the Christian clinic.
Because they also pray for us. It showed people often want that integrated, holistic care. And the Chincha earthquake response in Peru also showed this kind of partnership, local church, NGOs, businesses working together on physical and spiritual needs.
Okay, that's a really helpful roadmap. Listen, start small, partner locally, assess capacity, partner wisely with NGOs, aim for sustainability, empower, integrate spiritually. Now, how does this service work actually connect organizationally to the church plant?
There are different models.
Right. They definitely complement each other. Service builds bridges. The church offers the spiritual home and discipleship. But how they're structured can vary.
What's the simplest model?
The source calls it incidental, basically occasional projects.
Like a one-off clinic or a food drive.
Exactly. Limited commitment, good for starting out, builds goodwill without being a huge organizational drain.
Okay. Then there's fully integrated.
Here, service and church planting share staff, budget, leadership. It's all under the church's authority. The Salvation Army is a classic example. Or that church in Costa Rica, Pearl Alto.
With a kindergarten, clinics, computer lab, all woven into church life.
Yeah. The source says this can work for simpler things, like maybe a soup kitchen run by volunteers, but it gets really difficult for complex ministries, like clinics, rehab centers, or especially economic development.
Right. Those need specialized skills and intense focus that can easily overshadow the church planting work itself. The demands can just pull the leadership away.
Got it. So if integration is tough for complex stuff, what about fully separate?
Just like it sounds. The service ministry runs completely independently owned organization, finances, staff. Maybe the NGO workers attend the church, but there's no formal link.
Why separate them?
Could be legal reasons or wanting to avoid that rice Christian perception. Often it's just an independent Christian NGO doing the work. It allows both the church and the NGO to focus on what they do best.
Makes sense. Then there's overlapping.
Kind of a middle ground, not fully integrated, not fully separate, but lots of shared personnel, maybe budget, strong public association. The risk here is confusion competing for resources, unclear authority can get messy.
Yeah, sounds like potential conflict. And the last one, generative.
This is where one starts the other. Like relief workers lead people to faith, and a church plant grows out of that. Or a church sees a need, starts a ministry, and it gets so big it needs to become its own separate foundation.
And the relationship needs clear definition as it evolves.
Exactly. The general principle seems to be, the more complex and institutional the service, like a hospital, the harder it is to integrate directly with a church plant. Wallace's point comes back. It's hard to do both really well simultaneously for the good of both the community and the church.
Those principles about the agency being a catalyst and the church being the pioneer presence seem relevant here too.
Yeah, emphasizing that partnership and the unique role of the local church.
Okay, let's pivot to those pitfalls we mentioned. The source is pretty clear that while compassion is vital, this integration isn't always smooth sailing.
Definitely not. There are real challenges. The first one mentioned is the classic issue of producing race Christians.
People showing up or converting just for the material benefits.
Yeah, food, aid, jobs. It's an age-old accusation, and the source admits it's almost unavoidable where deep poverty exists. Only God knows motives. Discernment is needed.
But it also mentioned Viv Grigg suggesting it might be less common than feared.
Right. Grigg argued aid alone rarely causes genuine conversion. The hard truth is, if you love and serve, you risk being taken advantage of. But the source says that risk shouldn't paralyze you into inaction. Don't stop loving.
That's a challenging balance. What's another pitfall?
Leadership drain. This is a huge one in many places. Talented national church leaders get hired away by NGOs or parachurch groups because the pay and benefits are much better.
Leaving the local church weaker.
Exactly. It's a brain drain from the church. NGOs need good leaders too, but it creates a real problem. The source suggests NGOs might need to think about their compensation structures, though that's complex.
Third pitfall, burnout and diffusion.
Service ministries take a lot of energy, time, people. Integrated models can easily drain resources away from core church planting tasks like evangelism and discipleship. Small plants are especially vulnerable.
Like that pastor in India running the orphanage who neglected the church plant.
Yeah, a common story. The source points to Acts 6 appointing deacons for service, so elders could focus on word and prayer as a potential biblical model for dividing labor. Wallace's community development tail wagging the church dog is a vivid warning.
The service work can just take over.
It can become all-consuming, hindering the church plant itself. Balance is absolutely crucial.
Okay. What about superficiality or naivete?
This is about jumping into service without really understanding the need, the cost, or having the right expertise. It goes back to start small. Don't offer simplistic answers to complex problems.
And the point about specialized roles, doctors aren't usually church planters and vice versa.
Right. Trying to wear both hats often means neither job gets done well. The source recommends having qualified people focused primarily on their specific ministry, even if they work together.
That Philippines healthcare study underlined this needing a dedicated health worker and a dedicated church planter working in tandem.
Exactly. Dedicated focus is key. And the last pitfall here is bait and switch.
Using aid to manipulate people spiritually.
Yes. Service is a testimony, not a trick. Don't make aid conditional on listening to a sermon. Be upfront about who you are and why you're serving. Offer spiritual help naturally, but don't coerce.
Advertising a clinic, but delivering a sermon instead.
That kind of thing damages trust badly. Integrity is essential. Serve because it's right, flowing from love, not just as an evangelism tactic.
That's a clear ethical line. Now, the source gave special attention to pitfalls around economic development programs, calling it a minefield.
Yeah, ED is particularly tricky. Things like job creation or microloans can be amazing, transformative, even open doors and closed areas. Think business as mission. But it's also fraught with potential for waste, jealousy, conflict, mixed motives. It can really damage a church plant if not handled incredibly carefully.
So what are the guiding principles for navigating this minefield?
Number 1, qualified leaders. You need people who understand business, finance, and the local culture around money and work. Spiritual leaders aren't always equipped for this. Doing both usually hurts both.
Makes sense. Principle 2.
Have a separate board or foundation administer the ED program, independent from the church leadership. This is normally best, the source stresses. Mixing church authority with loan decisions or job assignments is a recipe for conflict, especially in collectivist cultures where family loyalty is strong.
Keep the roles distinct to avoid impossible situations. Third,
understand the local worldview about money, work, possessions. It's often very different from Western assumptions. The source mentions Murrens's book on African money matters. The board needs that cross-cultural understanding.
Okay, and specific ED pitfalls to avoid.
One is inadvertently promoting materialistic values. Helping people is good, but some ED can subtly shift focus to economic status over spiritual growth. It can create entitlement or resentment.
And the related pitfall, confusion of image.
Right, like Jim Yost's experience in Irian. When he focused on ED, people seemed to follow his priority. The material stuff and church growth slowed. He looked more like a businessman than a spiritual guide.
His conclusion was pretty stark. Planters should probably avoid ED directly and bring in specialists.
Yeah. Or at least be incredibly careful not to confuse the message. The goal isn't become a Christian and get stuff. Again, this doesn't mean don't help, just do it wisely.
And then there was that really strong warning, in bold, don't finance churches through church-operated businesses.
Yeah, strongly discouraged.
Right.
For good reasons. 1, biblical stewardship emphasizes giving from God's people. 2, the church isn't a business. Running one creates conflicts and drains energy. 3, planters usually lack business skills, risking failure and discrediting the gospel. 4, businesses are risky and can drain funds, not provide them.
So it can actually backfire financially.
Big time. The better way. Support separately owned businesses, maybe run by church members that provide jobs, then employed believers give to the church. The church stays focused on its spiritual mission.
That separation seems critical again. Okay, finally, the source looks specifically at church planting among the very poor, where holistic ministry seems almost essential.
Absolutely. The destitute, refugees, slum dwellers, they're often responsive but face overwhelming physical needs, hopelessness, lack of education, dependency. Survival needs dominate.
And established churches might not be a good fit.
Often not welcoming, or the poor just don't feel comfortable. So specific churches for the poor are often needed. It requires immense patience, strong calling, long-term commitment from the team.
And that delicate balance.
Yeah.
Identifying with the people, living simply, but also managing your own health and stress.
Yes, it's high-stress work. An incarnational approach living among the people builds trust. Viv Grigg's work is key here, but crucially, avoid paternalism. Empower people, help them see their potential. Leaders can emerge from anywhere.
And the source ended with some incredible examples.
2 really stand out. That small, poor church in Liberia, Hope Evangelical Free, only 50 people.
But they started a school for over 200 kids.
In a makeshift building they built themselves. Teachers barely paid. The pastor just said, we have to. Our children are the future, whatever it takes. Just refusing to be victims. Incredible hope and sacrifice.
Wow. That's kingdom impact.
And the other, the Gramin Pachi Mandal movement among Dalits in India, huge growth, 700,000 baptized, deeply contextualized, holistic ministry.
And they see economic self-reliance as a religious duty.
Article 19, it's about reclaiming dignity through the gospel and recognizing education and economic freedom are vital to escape oppression. They have huge education programs, people getting better jobs, becoming entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Real spiritual, mental, physical, and economic transformation. Shows what's possible.
They truly embody that full kingdom impact the source is talking about.
Have a deep dive. It's clear this work of planting churches with true kingdom impact is complex, but so vital.
Yeah, we've seen how evangelism, love in action, and worship are all meant to be woven together, that marriage idea again. Each part strengthens the others.
And we've wrestled with the practical side, starting service wisely, the different organizational structures, and those really significant pitfalls. Rice Christians, leadership drain, burnout, naivete, bait and switch, and the specific dangers around economic development.
But the source ends on such a hopeful note with those powerful examples from Liberia and India. It shows the incredible potential for holistic transformation when the church really reflects the fullness of God's kingdom.
It really does. And here's where it gets interesting for you, listening, thinking about all this. What does it mean in your own context? How could these dimensions, evangelism, service, worship, be better integrated where you are?
Or maybe what balance is needed to avoid some of these pitfalls we discussed. It definitely pushes us to think about how we measure the impact of our faith communities, moving beyond just numbers to look at the real holistic transformation happening in people's lives and the community around them.